Libby, the virtual curtain has been lifted.
Hey, Brian. Welcome to Dystopia Today. It is Thursday. It is June 10th, and we are back documenting democracy's dysfunction. I'm Libby Emmons. I'm the editor-in-chief at the Post Millennial, and I'm here with Brian Edward,
That's
who's
me.
director of Misinformed. How's it going?
I'm almost out of
in a while
soma
in real life.
for I'm gonna have to get more
Right?
from my
Oh
doctor.
my God. So we're gonna start off with some crazy stuff that happened this week. There was a really interesting thing. A lot of people saw this. There was a speech at Yale. It wasn't really a speech. It was a lecture given by like a visiting psych professor. And I took a look at this speech. This made the rounds. Everybody wrote about it. And I took a different approach and tried to figure out, we keep seeing these things. We're still shocked by professors saying things like, we really hate white people and we're totally entitled to hate white people. And there's no reason not to hate white people. We're still shocked by this language for reasons unknown. We should not be shocked by it anymore. Every day we're treated to new revelations of how far anti-racist pedagogy has infiltrated American schools. And we've seen it in theory and practice at the nation's top universities. Now at Yale, the nation's largest public school systems, like the one here in New York City that I've taken a look at myself, each released video. You guys have done so much work in finding this stuff. And we've been writing about it. Each time we see a new video, it's more shocking than the one that came before. And that's certainly true of Yale. But this is actually exactly what we should be expecting at this point from higher education.
Right. Did you title this? Did you title this like Kill Whitey? It's the new normal?
I did. I called it Yale's Kill Whitey speech. It's not shocking. It's the new normal.
Sean, can you pull that up?
If you'd like to. It's a bit of a crazy title, I think, but there it is. This story about the Yale professor came from Katie Herzog, who does the Blocked and Reported podcast. It was shared by Barry Weiss on her Substack. And this one features psychiatry professor Aruna Kilanani, who also has a private practice. And she gave this lecture at the Yale School of Medicine's Yale School of Medicine's Department of Child Study. And she said that white people were basically the worst people ever. Some quotes that we had from this. The talk was called The Psychopathic Problem of the White Mind. And it included talking points about how the cost of talking to white people is the cost of your own life as they suck you dry. There are no good apples out there, she said. White people make my blood boil. She told students, I had fantasies of unloading a revolver into the head of any white person that got in my way, burying their body and wiping my bloody hands as I walked away, relatively guiltless, with a bounce in my step, like I did the world an effing favor. White people are out of their minds, and they have been for a long time, she told the students. And she spoke to the recent issue that white people don't like being derided and insulted on the basis of their race, as though this were sort of evidence of their problem. She called it a psychological predicament because white people feel that we are bullying them when we bring up race. They feel that we should be thanking them for all that they have done for us. I don't think I've ever felt that way personally. They're confused, she said, and so are we. We keep forgetting that directly talking about race is a waste of our breath. We are asking a demented, violent predator who thinks that they are a saint or a superhero to accept responsibility. It ain't going to happen, Kilanani said. They have 5 holes in their brain. It's like banging your head against a brick wall. It's just like sort of not a good idea. She said, we need to remember that directly talking about race to white people is useless because they are at the wrong level of conversation. Addressing racism, she said, assumes that white people can see and process what we are talking about. They can't. That's why they sound demented. They don't even know they have a mask on. White people think it's their actual face. We need to get to know the mask, she said. Yale University School of Drama's stage manager chair, Narda Alcorn, is someone we talked about last week, who had a similar view, who looks forward to destroying the entire theatrical art form in the name of anti-racism. This kind of messaging has made it to the White House. It's a frequent talking point of our esteemed president. He even delivers these messages to university grads himself, which he did this year. It becomes increasingly difficult, I find, to listen to advocates of anti-racist pedagogy or critical race theory, hear them explain that what they're doing is teaching equity or correcting the problematic teaching and studies that have come before. But really what this is anti-whiteness. And it's anti-whiteness being delivered in classrooms as some sort of like pedagogical reparations for whatever's happened previously.
Does she say what whiteness is? Or do you have a concept of whiteness is? Or what is whiteness?
What is whiteness? What is whiteness? Everyone seems to have their own definition, but specifically, and I think we talked about this at one point, whiteness apparently is something that was constructed in order to oppress Black people. That's like the anti-racist definition of whiteness. It's this constructed thing that was invented specifically in order to oppress people.
White
but I
culture.
find it to be so, white culture. We used to call it the dominant culture back in the early 2000s. The idea was that this was the dominant culture. It wasn't white culture. It was the dominant culture. And it was more of a class-based kind of idea from what I certainly understood at the time as a younger person. The thing about whiteness, too, is that there's the skin color of whiteness. And then there's this whole other concept of the oppressiveness of whiteness. So that you have anti-racist people will even talk about people who happen to be white versus white people, as though these are two completely separate things.
But
and I wonder
call
which
it
one Rachel Dolezal is. Is Rachel Dolezal, is she a white person? Or is she a person who happens to be white? Right? I mean, what was that all about?
So they knocked her down. They said, no, you're not allowed to racially transition, even though she already had for 10 years.
Yeah, she was already part of the Black advocacy group. I forget what it was called.
I think she was in that chapter of NAACP.
Was it the NAACP? Yeah. Yeah, and there has been this long-standing idea that there cannot be racism against white people, and that minorities in America cannot be racist against the dominant group. That any prejudice or bias from minorities toward white people is not race-based but privilege-based, and that this is a justifiable prejudice. There was a man this week, last weekend actually, Washington Square Park, New York City. The police have been closing the park at 10 p.m., largely at the request of local residents who were tired of having the park be a party center, even though Washington Square Park is kind of a party center, really. But anyway, so cops were shutting it down. There was this guy who didn't want the park to get shut down. He had gone there to meet some friends, apparently, and he called out one of the Asian officers and started saying really vile, racist things to him. And someone on a bicycle went by and said, some other New Yorker, and was like, stop saying that. You're an effing racist, man. Stop saying that. And the guy who had been saying all the mean things to the Asian cop, and we have a lot of Asian cops in the city. The guy was like, he was Black. And he was like, Black people can't be racist.
That's right.
So I'm not being racist.
I saw this
Black
on Twitter.
Can't be racist. Right? What was up with that? Okay. So because your skin color is not the majority one, that means you could just say really nasty things to whoever you want. And that's totally acceptable.
This stuff doesn't stay in the university. No way.
No, it really doesn't. And it's become commonplace and normal now for pundits, journalists, artists to classify white people according to stereotypes and to feel righteous doing it. Our educational system has successfully rearranged the idea of race, and instead of a society where each person's worth is based on who they are, it's based on these stereotypes of race. It's based on ethnic background. We've recreated a society where one's race is integral to what a person is, to their essence and to their value. And this constant drumbeat of systemic racism, it's not going to get us anywhere. So this Yale professor, Kelanani, she issued a defense for herself. We have another article about that written by Hannah Nightingale, who's one of the writers at the Post Millennial. And she defended her comments, in fact, and she further justified them. She said that her words had been taken out of context, even though it was a 55-minute lecture, the full thing of the full audio of which was available on the Substack. She said that too much of the discourse on race is dry. In an email she sent to the New York Times in her defense, she said, bland regurgitation of new vocabulary words with no work in the unconscious. And if you want to hit the unconscious, you will have to feel real negative feelings.
Yeah, fun.
So it's more of this like, you have to feel uncomfortable in order to be doing the work of anti-racism. She said, no one wants to look at their actions or face their own negative feelings about what they are doing. The best way to control the narrative is to focus on me, she said, and make me the problem, which is what I stated occurs in the dynamic of racism. My work is important, she said, and I stand by it. We need to heal this country. The Yale took down the video. They limited the access to it. They said it contains profanity and images of violence, and so they issued a disclaimer, so now nobody can hear it.
Right.
Is that better?
C-Y-A.
Is it better that they took it down, really? Or should it be, I think they should just let it fly. Like, if this is the kind of stuff that you're going to be teaching, let us all hear it.
What's such a moderate,
why are you keeping
weak
this
sauce
silent?
reaction to, like, rather than like condemn it, rather than say, yeah, she's crazy, or do some kind of sanctioning. Yeah, we'll just delete the video. Weak sauce.
Well, they didn't even delete it. They just made it harder to. They just made it harder to access.
I know. So yeah, and like the one that Barry Weiss released was, I think, a like cell phone recording of something in that. That's why the quality's bad. You can check it out on her Substack. It was good, although the quality of video is
it was
bad.
great.
Right. And like this
The
kind
audio,
of stuff, this kind of like racism stuff that's bouncing back and forth. I want to hop over to and see if I can see your act of ridiculous scientific racism and add you. Can you pull up tweet 0, Sean? I want to talk about Claire Lehman and James Lindsay got into a bit of a scuffle, but we first to give it some context. So there's a thing that Peter Prigozhin tweeted out, although this has been really making the rounds. So this is one on whiteness in an academic peer-reviewed journal, and if I could read, Libby, to you the abstract. Whiteness.
Sure.
Yeah, whiteness is a condition, one that first acquires and then one has a malignant parasitic condition in which white people have a particular susceptibility. The condition is foundational, generating characteristics ways of being in one's body, one's mind, and one's world. Parasitic whiteness renders its hosts' appetites voracious, insatiable, and perverse. These deformed appetites particularly target non-white peoples. Once established, these appetites are nearly impossible to eliminate. Effective treatment consists of a combination of psychic and social historical interventions. Such interventions can reasonably aim to reshape whiteness infiltrated appetites, to reduce their intensity, redistribute their aims, and occasionally turn those aims towards the work of reparation. When remembered and represented, the ravages wreaked on the chronic condition can function as either a warning, like never again, or as temptation, great again. Memorialization alone, therefore, no guarantee against regression. There is no permanent cure. How is this racist claptrap allowed? So anyway, so
that was in a journal. That journal was released May 27th, I think, and every article in it was along a similar vein.
The Journal of American Psychoanalytic Association, something. Either way, it's I'm not sure, peer-reviewed, like whatever. I don't want to pay for that journal. Okay, so can you pull up tweet number 1, Sean? So here's the original bugaboo. So
that article is $37.
I'm not paying it. Not paying it. I'll read the abstract.
That was enough already.
Original bugaboo. So here's tweet one from James Lindsay, who responds to this and says, in light of inhabiting whiteness, which characterizes white people as parasites with no known permanent cure, I'm going to re-up this statement that I made before about wokeness containing a seed of genocide, and retweets a statement that he said from 2020. It says, wokeness turns people sociopathic. This is because it utterly fixates, by definition, on one type of suffering, hegemonic oppression. So this is like the narrowed empathy that I'm always talking about. It hopefully won't grow into something that bears fruit, but it is the seed of a genocide. And then later added, when somebody asked, if you're going to toss around the notion of genocide of whites, can you at least define what you mean by the term? Do you mean state-approved mass murder? Go on.
Yeah, so walk me through this. So basically, James Lindsay was saying that an abstract of this nature would veer our society toward creating a genocide against white people.
He's saying this is the seed of a genocide. So when you can,
seed of a genocide.
And it'll become clear here for a second. So somebody says, you're just tossing around genocide. Like, what do you mean by genocide? So Lindsay writes, I mean dead people, right? And somebody says, and then he tweets out the genocide, like 10 steps: classification, symbolization, discrimination, dehumanization, organization, polarization, preparation, persecution, extermination, denial, right? Okay, heavy stuff. This is straight out of the Auschwitz Never Again and the museums that we went to
and
for
also
the Holocaust.
The Cultural Revolution, which you talked about in terms of the Han people.
And that's most likely
who were also a majority. They were also a majority, correct?
That's
Han
right.
People?
Yep, 96% majority, even more than we are. So it goes on. So then this interlocutor, a guy named New Radical Centrism, says, over the past century...
Wait, by we, you mean white people? More than we are?
Well,
he
means non-woke. Not non-woke people. Right. So it'll clear it up. So over the past century, there have been dozens of societies, none with the liberal traditions of history of the U.S., in which stages were far more advanced and yet no genocide. But uniquely, is this going to happen to the majority of the U.S.? Then somebody hops in and says, a vocal distance hops in and says, well, China and Cuba and the USSR would like to have a word. And then says, is genocide imminent? No. But do I think there are seeds of the genocide? Yes. And James Lindsay pops back and says, agree. I think it manifesting is unlikely, but the ideology shows all the warning signs, and we should be paying attention. I don't think there will be a white genocide. I think it will be an unwoke genocide. Do you think most Asians are getting out of this?
He clarified his position to say
this is an ideological genocide. So very much cultural revolution, not the final solution. Seriously, I mean, it's one thing, right? Not all genocide.
It does sound a bit absurd. But anyway, go ahead.
So Claire Lehman.
So then what happened?
Claire Lehman hops in and says,
who's the publisher and founder of Quillette, out of Australia, where, full disclosure, I've written at least a handful of times.
Awesome, yeah, and I follow these two people's work a lot. So she says, James Lindsay is now peddling a white genocide theory, implying that genocide against whites in the U.S. is imminent and has the potential to inspire racist violence. Such comments are extreme, reckless, and irresponsible. They should be denounced. And adds opposition to wokeness and critical race theory is one thing. Suggesting that the majority racial group in the U.S. is on the verge of being slaughtered is another. Lots of Lindsay's supporters are arguing I've misrepresented him. I don't see how. And she says, possible maniacs, extremists, people who have become insane via overexposure to the internet might feel inspired or emboldened or validated to commit terrorist violence. Lindsay needs to stop now.
So what do you think? Are you Team Lindsay or are you Team Lehman?
Right. Now, I'm not going to question either of the characters because I like both of them. But I don't think...
Right, but what do you have what's your take?
I don't agree with Claire because the thing is, a person that's following James Lindsay wants... If we can't stand up and do what we just did and said, this woman at Yale and this person that's writing and getting peer-reviewed, if we can't denounce that, what can we object to? Like, can we call the cops when we get beat up anymore? Or are we going to need permission for that too? I mean,
we're not supposed to do that, by the way.
At some point, you have to be able to object. And to say that white nationalists might do this, well, guess what? White nationalists aren't watching James Lindsay. He's said a lot of negative things about white nationalists. There's plenty of obnoxious stuff in 4chan and 8chan for them to do whatever they're going to do on their own. James Lindsay is a leftist compared to what's going on at 8chan. And so to me...
Oh, I have no idea. Does 8chan still exist? I thought that they were like officially done.
No, I think they're still around. Yeah. But you can find this stuff anywhere. And anytime you're going to push...
I'm thinking of the other one.
Yeah, but so there is, to be totally fair to Claire, there is such a thing as called white genocide conspiracy theory that's happening. This is an alt-right thing. And what the alt-right are saying, it's not that there's going to be concentration camps or gulags, but rather the Jews probably are this big force, and they're pushing interracial pornography and things like that, and are going to brown everybody out. So you're going to eventually not be white because everything is going to be brown.
I think the concept that there's going to be a genocide against white people in the United States or in the Anglosphere at all seems remarkably insane. It just seems absolutely crazy to me. I mean, I know that we saw in Zimbabwe, like the massacre of white farmers. And they were a distinct minority. First of all, the white people in Zimbabwe. But there is sort of an interesting concept that is going on here, which is there's a couple of things. One, both these people were sort of intellectual dark web people, right? I mean, Quillette was like a foundational journal in that movement. James Lindsay's left but anti. Sorry, that's my kid. Hi, kid. You should be going to bed, I think, probably. All right.
All that talk about genocide woke him up. You're freaking him out.
Hi, hon. It's anti-whiteness time. I'll go read him some Ibram X. Kendi at bed.
Oh, God.
Some anti-racist baby. We'll get that all sorted out. He'll be safe for school tomorrow. But I think there's an interesting thing going on. So first these are people who were in the intellectual dark web, which was such a fascinating movement a few years ago that has since fizzled out to a large extent, mostly because it turns out that all those people disagree with one another. However, I do think that one thing that came out of it is that they're still standing up for each other's right to speak. So while Claire says that James' language should be denounced, she does not call for him to be censored.
Yep.
She does not call for him to be removed from anything. She doesn't call for his, work to be banned or anything like that. And to that extent, I have a great deal of respect for both of these thinkers who are willing to speak their minds, engage in a conversation about it, and, realize that they both completely have the right to free speech. So that's a cool thing already. There's also this thing that Jordan Peterson talks about in his lectures, and he was, of course, an IDW guy as well. And he talks about how the Nazi soldiers who were enforcing, I'm probably going over time, but
what's he say? What's he say about that?
But he says he talks about how the Nazi soldiers didn't realize that they were doing something wrong. Like the basic guys who were rounding people up were just doing the thing they were doing. And he speaks about, testimonies at Nuremberg and things like that. So then the question becomes, how do you ever know how close you are to total breakdown of society and culture? How do you know how close you are to the end of a successful civilization before it breaks apart and ends up having to be reformed as something else? Because that break apart moment is excruciatingly painful, results in genocide, as we've seen in the 20th century, and as, of course, our world has seen countless times before that across cultures. So, you have Lindsay saying, like, we're super close to the breaking point. You also have the president saying, President Biden saying, like, we're at this inflection point in history. Barry Weiss launched a new podcast where she's talking about how we're at this, like, identifiable and, intense moment in history. We're all sort of imagining that we're about to go straight to hell, right? Like we all sort of like have it in our ideas. We had like a global pandemic. We're all just going to go straight to hell. And it kind of reminds me of that episode of Next Generation where you have Guinan and Riker's in charge because Jean-Luc is now he's Locutus
Oh, it's
basically.
the
And
best of both worlds. Yeah.
yeah, so good. And Riker goes into 10 forward and Guinan, bends his ear for a minute. There's, of course, Whoopi Goldberg is amazing on that show. And she says to him, when people think they're going to die tomorrow, they're going to find a way to do it. And he's like, oh, maybe I should stop being quite so defeatist about fighting the Borg tomorrow. Pump up the guys, But I think that's sort of, oops, I dropped my shoe. I think that's sort of an interesting place where we are. A lot of people seem to think we're going to die tomorrow. James Lindsay is among them. You have Claire Lehman over here going like, you know what, maybe that's not the best approach.
Right. Now,
so
he does add later that he doesn't think genocide is imminent. He doesn't even think it's likely. He just thinks these are seeds. So again, if I'm throwing these seeds of thistles all in my yard, they may or may not germinate. But if they do, my feet are going to hurt when I walk over them. So,
sure.
That was part of it.
Yeah, but that's an interesting thing, this notion of seeds, because this is getting pushed further and further. It's being pushed harder and harder by the White House. I mean, it's being pushed by the White House.
Yeah.
So
again, seeds. You don't want to be able to get to like step 7 on there was somebody in this thread that said, when the politicians are voting on the genocide, then we can talk about this. And I thought, are you kidding me? Then it's too late, right? So you want to stop everything at seeds. I was like, I wanted to downvote that one, but I couldn't. You know what was fun, though? The one fun thing when you talk about genocide, like Melissa Chen will always hop in to throw in a comment on this. And she said, it's only white genocide when it comes from the Blanc genocide region of France. Otherwise, it's just a sparkling demographic anxiety.
Well, Melissa Chen, as usual, is correct again.
It's hilarious. And then somebody then challenged her and said, but don't you think? And she goes, it's a joke. It's a joke about 2 people that I followed their work. And I think it's an interesting thing. I think that Lindsay's fine to raise the alarm. I think that people don't understand. I think he's a misunderstood character, and it's a style thing, personally.
Yeah.
But talk to me about Maya Forstater.
Oh, well, this was very exciting. I mean, if we want some good news, we can veer away from genocide and into gender critical theory. So this is very exciting. Maya Forstater, she's an economist. She's an accountant. She worked for a think tank in the UK that was actually based in the US, and she got fired for stating her gender critical views not at work on her personal social media. In 2018, Maya Forstater put out a tweet thread about the proposed reforms to England's Gender Recognition Act, which would be updated to include gender expression as a protected status, which now we have too. So bully for everyone. Forstater holds the view that biological sex is not a mutable condition, however. So she wrote, UK government consultation on reforming the Gender Recognition Act proposes to dramatically change the scope of the law from requiring medical diagnosis of gender dysphoria for change of sex on a birth certificate to using the basis of self-identification. So what this means is that if you are a person that identifies as transgender, the concept of self-ID means that you can say, right? Like I could just say I'm a man. And even though I haven't undergone any changes, my manness now must be recognized by the federal government on my driver's license. I get to go back and change my birth certificate, all of these kind of things. And Forstater's view was, as many people's view, is that this is actually not such a great thing for women who would then have self-ID'd biological males who have self-ID'd as women in women's spaces, changing rooms, locker rooms, competing in the Olympics in the weightlifting category from New Zealand, things like this. So she wrote, I share the concerns of Fair Play for Women, which is a women's advocacy group in the UK, that radically expanding the legal definition of women so that it can include both males and females makes it a meaningless concept. So if males can be women and women can be men, then why do we have these words at all if they are completely interchangeable? She says that it undermines women's rights and protections for vulnerable women and girls. Some transgender people have cosmetic surgery, she wrote, but most retain their birth genitals. Everyone's equality and safety should be protected, but women and girls lose out on privacy, safety, and fairness if males are allowed into changing rooms, dormitories, prisons, sports teams. In 2018, these things were all basically preliminary. They weren't like totally entrenched yet. Now we have, California has passed a law. They passed it last summer. It went into effect in January of this year. Like, almost 300 men have put into go to women's prisons without, castration, without taking any drugs of, cross-sex hormones or whatever. So these things that Forstater warned against in 2018, that a lot of women warned against, have pretty much come to fruition. Gender self-ID is a thing now. Men are in women's prisons. Men are on women's sports teams. You have like governors across anyway. Maya got fired. Her contract got not renewed. And they were like, oh, we just didn't renew it. We just didn't renew it. It was no big deal. But she basically got canned for having these views. After she got fired, she took the case to court. She lost. It was sort of devastating. And she has since appealed. Now this tax expert who lost her job at a US think tank for tweeting that biological sex is real and that sex matters has won her appeal. That means that people who express gender critical beliefs that sex is important cannot be sacked or otherwise punished for it without their employer being legally liable. And actually, Erin Peirce, who is one of my gender critical writers in the UK, wrote this up for me this morning. I woke up at like 6:30 this morning to find her telling me, Maya won. I'm writing it for you right now. I was very excited to get that before I'd even had any coffee.
But it's wild that this is a minority view and it seems to have majority power. Like, this should still be a debate. This is what pisses me off.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of fascinating. A lot of the really vocal people from the trans rights movement are people who prior to transitioning were white men. And it's almost as though these white men have found a workaround to the white male oppression thing. So once they become the major minority, they can now speak their minds fully, gain all the benefits of victim status, and push their way back to the top. So bully for you, white men who say that you're women. What was interesting, though, about this case, which I followed through the whole thing, was how pervasive it was through culture at large. It basically like took down J.K. Rowling almost. She's way too big to cancel, but it certainly touched her.
Yeah.
Now, J.K. Rowling, in response to the Meyer Forster's initial loss in court about her termination, she wrote, "Dress however you please, call yourself whatever you like, sleep with any consenting adult who will have you, live your best life in peace and security, but force women out of their jobs for stating that sex is real. Hashtag, I stand with Maya. This is not a drill." So that's a pretty great thing to say, right? It's very tolerant and woke and lefty sounding. That you can say as you please and dress as you please and sleep with whoever will have you. I mean, I respect that quite a bit. Mark Hamill of Luke Skywalker fame made the mistake of liking, putting a little heart there, making a little mistake of liking J.K. Rowling's tweet. This was back in 2019. Yeah. So Maya Forstater's original tweets were 2018 September, when she had hit, as it's called, peak trans. So Mark Hamill tweeted this out, and he got hell for it. Someone named Alyssa Rabin on Twitter said, "Why did you like this transphobic tweet? I do not stand with Maya." So Mark Hamill took his cue and he did the right and upstanding thing and threw J.K. Rowling and Maya Forstater under the bus. He wrote, "Ignorance is no excuse, but I liked the tweet without understanding what the last line or hashtags meant. It was the first 4 lines I liked. I didn't realize it had any transphobic connotation." Oddly,
It's
though,
such
since then,
self-serving cowardice.
yeah, many people have noticed that that their likes on J.K. Rowling's tweet disappear. I have actually had to go back and like her tweet like 4 or 5 times or something
Oh,
ridiculous.
wow.
Uh, yeah. So let me just tell you what the judge said in this appeals ruling. The judge said a philosophical belief, because that was the issue. Was Forstater expressing a philosophical belief that is therefore protected or not? Right? That's the question. The first case ruled that it was not a philosophical belief and was therefore not protected, but that the person who was at her workplace who didn't like that she had said these things, who I hope I'm not getting this all wrong. I don't remember entirely, but I believe there was someone at her workplace who complained about it, and I believe that was a trans person. But I just don't have the facts, so
Their opinion might be protected.
yeah.
See, that's what's weird.
That was the thing. It was like the opinion of the person who was opposed to Maya was protected, but Maya's perspective was not protected.
Right.
So the judge said a philosophical belief, and this was in the UK, so the laws are slightly different from ours. A philosophical belief would only be excluded for failing to satisfy Granger v., which is, a case, if it was the kind of belief the expression of which would be akin to Nazism or totalitarianism, and thereby liable to be excluded from the protection of rights under Articles 9 and 10 of the European Convention of Human Rights. So basically, this idea that biological sex is real, that was equated to transphobia, is not actually, according to this judge, equatable to genocidal beliefs, Nazism, totalitarianism. So the judge said the claimant's gender critical beliefs, which were widely shared and which did not seek to destroy the rights of trans persons, clearly did not fall into that category. And yeah, so this was actually great news for Maya Forstater and for gender critical women across the Anglosphere, I think, who have been fighting this primarily in the dark, getting slammed by everyone for it. You have radical feminists teaming up with conservative Republican women on this issue alone, with really like very little other common ground. And just getting slammed left and right, losing work, losing friends, losing family, losing children.
Nikki D in the chat says, like, maybe these people would be more helped by helping them be gay. Do you think that this is like a left-wing homophobia? That instead of the idea is the mind is correct, we must change the body. Whereas right-wing homophobia was, let's change the mind, the body is correct.
Yeah, I do think that that's pretty interesting. And anything that tells you that you have to undergo surgery and hormones and medicine and medication and all of that to be your true self is lying to you, right? I mean, your true self is like the self that you are. We used to have this idea that, you're beautiful just the way you are. What was that like? Is it Lionel Richie, maybe? I don't know. But I was all in. Like, I'm all in on that part. But yeah, I think that the Nikki D there might have a point in that there have been a lot of transitions of people who then grow up and they're like, wait a second, maybe I was just gay. Also, a woman that I know who is a lesbian was talking to me a while ago. This was actually several years ago, and she said that all the young dykes are on T, and that seemed really sad to me because, like, dykes are awesome and hot. Like, why? Like, that sucks. Well, so if that's a thing, if there's a thing about that where it's not actually some sort of condition that needs repairing physically, but instead a maybe mental adjustment, that would be really too bad. I think there's been a lot of cases about that, though. Abigail Shrier writes about that.
And especially for younger kids. Like, it's different when this is an adult, but kids, I think that's definitely a bridge too far.
I think so too. There was a case in the UK also, Kira Bell, who turns out was a lesbian and underwent medical gender transition. Like, I think she was 16. She had a full mastectomy, and now she's a grown woman with hair on her chest and a deep voice and no breasts, and she's a lesbian, and she's like, this was really not the plan. This is weird.
Yeah,
and I follow several accounts on Twitter of people where that's what happened to them. And it seems such a shame, because to believe that your body is wrong in its reproductive organs prior to ever having had a first sexual experience seems like it's just not enough information to make that change. It just doesn't seem like enough information.
I know. You don't let your 13-year-old like necessarily make a decision on what to eat. So
right. And there have been cases. There have been cases where I think it was actually Jazz Jennings, and again, hopefully I have this right, but I think it was Jazz Jennings who went on puberty blockers at a young age. Then by the time they were going to have a whole, neo-vagina situation, there wasn't enough penile tissue to do that operation, because the growth had been stunted at a very young age. But yeah, I think we do our children a disservice when we don't let them grow up naturally.
Yeah.
I mean, this is why you don't want kids to start taking drugs when they're 12, right? We don't want that.
We don't. I
knew someone who started dropping acid when he was I think 12 and 13 years old, and continued dropping acid until he was 16. Dude is a mess. First of all, compared to the rest of his family, he is wicked short. He should have been way taller compared to the rest of his family. He doesn't have the brain capacity that he ought to have. He's a perfectly nice guy. Maybe has some gambling issues, no judgment really. But I think if he could go back and do it over again, and he said this, he was like, I probably shouldn't have been dropping that much acid when I was a kid and I didn't have a fully formed brain. I think that's true of all this stuff. I think this is true of Ritalin and putting kids on drugs when they're in high school like that. I wonder about this stuff.
Yeah, it does. So speaking of a bridge too far, and I totally agree, especially on the kids. do you want to get into some woke engineering?
Woke engineering, I think that's what we're talking about.
So I want to play a video that we tweeted out that I found looking at. I'm finding wokeness in places that normally you'd expect to find this in humanities. It's almost poo-poo. But when you see it in engineering, bridges care about math. They don't care about society. So here, this is a lecture to the University of Florida Engineering School by another university professor of law.
And I said to myself, well, I'm not an engineer, right? I don't speak your languages. And I know that when non-lawyers come to the law school to speak about law, we all get salty. Because we're sitting there thinking, what is this person talking about? And why are they talking to us when they don't even know what we do? So I decided I'm not going to talk about the specialties that you have, because I'm not an engineer, right? And I'll let you in on a little secret. I was married to an engineer, an aerospace engineer, for many, many years. And you know what? I still don't know what he did. I just know that there was graph paper in the house all the time, and he had these little implements that he would measure stuff with. That's all I know. So I figured that's what engineers do. So I'm not an engineer. I'm not going to talk to you about that. But what I can do is share with you how the work of civil engineers contribute to reinforce systems of inequality and prop up institutional racism. And I said to myself,
I don't know anything about engineering, but let me tell you how you prop up inequality and racism. Absolute BS, and I'll kind of we're running over time, so I'll skip through this a little bit. That laugh, that's a tell. That laugh, if you watch it, if you go to Myth Informed MKE Twitter, you can go to the link. She does that through every time she makes a BS statement. And there's another video I was going to play, but I'm not going to because we're running out of time, where she talks about one of the other obvious pieces of racism that she sees at UF. And that's a case where she says, did you know back last year, there was a gunman that walked into the African American Studies partner, started threatening people. And we called the cops, and the cops wouldn't even come into the building and told us to run outside, and then we'll help you there. And then cited the Florida alligator. And I thought, all right, maybe I'll do a tiny bit of investigative reporting and look that up. Found the article that she was talking about. They don't reference a gunman, right? And then they have a link to the actual police report where they don't even claim that not only did the person not have the gun, they don't even get arrested for trespassing because the person was never even asked to leave. Well, they don't know. The guy came in and said, you guys are teaching racism. And they said, no, we're not. And they said, yes, we are. And the guy goes, I want to debate you on my podcast. And then the one person got, there was no threats. The people admit that there was no threats, but he was annoying. They did call the cops. Eventually, he was asked to leave. They gave him some kind of warning, but no ticket. This is not a gunman. And this was 3 weeks after.
Sound like a gunman.
I was like, the reason why I looked it up, I thought, why haven't I heard of this? This would be national news. So she doesn't know anything about engineering, but like she knows a lot about rumor and hyperbole.
She doesn't know anything about engineering. She also doesn't know anything about this story she related.
It's exaggeration. That's
Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris.
Oh my God! But the tells. I would encourage people to listen to this. And then she makes another comment. She goes, "Well, I came to University of Florida in 1993, so she's been a tenured professor a long time. That's on the gravy train, let me tell you." Anyways, she says, when I got to Florida in 1993, that was the Old South. She goes, I wouldn't be surprised at all if I was going to see a black man wearing a chained collar on Fifth Avenue. And then she laughs.
Fifth Avenue, New York City?
No, that's, I believe, in Gainesville. So, because she's at University of Florida, right? So she believed that in 1993, she wouldn't have been surprised to see a black man in a collar. That's hyperbole. And you can tell because she laughs. And it's that Kamala Harris laugh. And it's an obvious lie. In my opinion, I'll go all in on that. I've got 3 of a kind. You're not going to beat me. So, I don't know. I think this law school teacher is full of it. I don't know. What do you think? Is it better at Beaverton, Oregon?
I don't know. We were talking about Beaverton, Oregon. This was a video you sent me that I wrote about. I found out who this teacher was. It was interesting. So there's this teacher at Beaverton, Oregon. She's been there for at least 16 years, and anyway, there's this teacher in Beaverton, Oregon. Who's been there for
Katherine Watkins, right?
Katherine Watkins.
I knew her by name.
She was talking.
I've been watching so much of her crap.
She was talking. Yeah, I know, right? She was talking all about how we need to disabuse students of the notion of the American dream. She identifies herself with the pronouns she, her, we, and us, which might be my favorite thing ever. We are and us. Is that how that works? She was talking on a Zoom call that was recorded last August about how to go back to school with COVID safety and BIPOC safety and all of these kinds of things. And she said the biggest thing is we need to start having anti-racist education for our students. She was talking to teachers about their, plans for the school year. And she says, we burst the bubble of Santa and the Easter Bunny, but we go ahead and let Uncle Sam and the American dream continue on. Meanwhile, the children are growing up and things aren't matching up. The things that are promised in the school system and what reality is, they're not matching up, and it's enraging. I think that's always been true. I mean, were you promised things in school that just didn't come true? Because I for sure was in every grade level, to the point where I stopped believing that anyone was promising me anything real. And that was just better. Then I was like, oh, okay.
What were you promised?
I don't know, a proper career, a life I would enjoy. I was promised that at some point I'd know how to make a cake in my home ec class.
Okay.
No, mostly I just ran away from bullies. Like,
But
I
they
was scared of
taught.
my parents.
Teachers were teachers. They weren't activists, right? They tried at least their best to try to prepare you for a career, I think.
Yeah. I learned how to make a paper mache elephant once, and that has served me well, I
Yeah?
must say.
Did that win you a
Um,
date at least once? It had to have.
yeah, so anyway, Katherine Watkins. But what was interesting about her, she said, we need to talk to our superintendents, our principals, and really talk about what's more important, social emotional learning or the curriculum. Now, obviously, we can smash it all together, she said, but which do they feel is more heavy? And hopefully, you would have an admin that would say the social emotional learning is more important than anything. But then also, I'm sorry, she said, but this is how I do it. If I see that everyone else is going with the regular rigor and stuff like that, I just don't tell people what I do. I close the door and take care of my students.
Wow. The
So
rigor and
rigorous
stuff.
education, actual learning, nah, we're not doing any of that anymore.
Didn't we tell people
Watkins
that like
noted
being
also,
cool in high school was like a flash in the pan and that you're supposed to study? Isn't
Mhm.
that every 80s nerd movie ever?
Yeah, I mean that was like Anthony Michael Hall's whole deal, right?
Yeah.
Like that was his major jam. Watkins noted that the call was being recorded and now everyone could know her tactics. And she went on about this. One thing that she did say that was interesting was she talked about the that it was the third rising, because the idea is using the concepts that came out of the feminist movement of first wave, second wave, third wave, which was and overlaying them on the anti-racist whole movement, which was civil war, civil rights, and now this last thing where we have to change how everybody thinks. That's sort of like the frame that this anti-racism stuff is the frame of changing how everybody thinks very intentionally. And that's also a big problem with third wave feminism. That's how we ended up with like a whole bunch of this idea that biological sex is not real because we are changing the way people think. That's where gender came from in the first place. Gender was a feminist concept where feminists could say like there's being a woman and then there are the stereotypical expectations associated with womanhood. Those are two separate things. So there are people who are women, right? I mean, it's the same.
Did you get a weird sense like when I read that third rising, the first thing I thought of was like the third intifada. You know, that's
sure.
what I thought. That's the first thing that came to my mind, and maybe I'm weird.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the third step in overcoming racism in a society, or the third step in overcoming misogyny in the society. The problem is that it doesn't actually play out right, because you can't change how people think by academic or legal fiat. You can't change how people think by executive order. All you can really do is make sure that there's equality under the law, and that society isn't constructed in a specifically women-hating or race-hating kind of way.
And
I think that we have primarily done that, and the rest of that work, if you can call it work, the rest of that is really just individuals in relationships with one another.
Yeah, it
like
is.
working out their lives.
Well, she's teaching
what else can you really do?
She's teaching at the high school level, and
she's junior and senior. She said, yeah.
So well, then maybe we should go to college to see if we can find the answers to our questions about equality and things. And I don't know. I'm gonna just pick the Nittany Lions of Penn State. And Sean, can you pull up a video? And I mean, you guys have
how is it to know
see
that,
this.
that you're walking around with that kind of benefit, that kind of affirmative action?
Well, like, I don't want to, I mean, like, I guess this could be all tied into, like, the idea of, like, white privilege and everything. And I guess it's just, like, I mean, like, I don't think it should be true. Like, it's crazy. Like, I don't really know what to think of it, but, like, it is what it, like, I don't know. I don't want to say it is what it is, but, like, it doesn't
not awkward at all.
Seem like the statistic, like, it's not changing. Like, it's, I don't know.
So it's confusing.
Yeah, it's confusing.
It shouldn't be that way.
Yeah.
Doesn't want to get
and yet it is that way.
Yeah.
And yet you're gonna, when you get your degree, when they hang you your degree, Bro, here's Tim. Here's your Timothy. What's your last name? Eimer. So they're going to call your name out, and you're going to walk across the stage, and it's going to be Timothy Eimer. And you're going to walk across the stage, and you're going to shake a hand. Here, you take that. You're going to shake the hand, and then you're going to get the degree. You're going to be like, yeah. And your parents are going to cheer or whatever, and you're going to have this degree. And you're going to think, oh, yeah, I fully earned the degree. I got it. And I deserve this, and I deserve everything that comes to it. Yeah, well, you know what? What's your last name, bro? Davis? Dude, Miles Davis? Oh. Same thing. Miles Davis. And Miles is going to walk across the stage, and he's going to have the same thing. He's going to get the degree and shake a hand and go like, yeah, and his family's going to cheer. And everyone's going to be like, you're going to be at graduation, and you're going to assume that these two guys are equal, and they're fucking not equal. It's not, we are not there, my friends. We are.
And to be dragged up at the front of a giant auditorium of 500 people, sit awkwardly with a member of another race as you just listen to this guy say, bro, hey, what's up, bro? Bro, your name's Miles Davis? Bro. I mean, that guy does not know a single Miles Davis song, I can tell you. And this is a weird racial struggle session. Like, I mean, is it so obvious? How concerned is this guy being cool and popular with his students?
Yeah, cool professors are the worst. They're cool professors, they're the worst ones of all.
I mean, like,
yeah, what you
earn
really
it,
want,
earn
you really
it.
want from a professor is someone who is distant, a little dismissive, you know, acts like they're better than you. You know, basically what I'm looking for in a relationship.
Well done. But to suggest they're not equal. And all we know is one is white, one is black. We don't know their majors. We don't know their GPAs. We don't know anything. And then to suggest this, like right in front of Miles, that society needs to radically change for him, like, how is that not insulting to him? The bigotry of low expectations, that he needs some kind of help. I mean, and the mild cost of $35,000 a year to teach you woke ideology that I can affirm you can find for free on YouTube. I watch a ton of it. So,
you know, the other great thing too is if Joe Biden has his way, then it'll all just be free. We can all just get this. We can all just finally get this stuff for what it's worth.
No, I just got attacked from the left. Ouch. Yeah, I mean, personally, I think the best thing for this guy is to follow his own principles and resign for diversity. Be the quit and equity. Right?
Be the quit and equity.
Right.
That's the thing. That was like the whole thing, resign for diversity.
Yeah.
People have legit recommended that also.
I mean, if he did that, I might be like, bro, I might have some respect for you again. I don't know.
Right.
It's crazy. I don't know. Could you pull up the last tweet on this critical race? I found this at Thomas Chatterson Williams. This is in 2017 from the Induction of Critical Race Theory that he's just underlined. And it says, critical race theory may even follow the example of critical legal studies, which has embedded itself so thoroughly in academic scholarship and teaching that its precepts are commonplace, part of the conventional wisdom. In fact, this might be happening. Perhaps more likely is that some aspects of critical race theory will be accepted by the mainstream and the halls of power, while other parts will continue to meet resistance. The rise of social media has only accelerated this trend. The narrative turn of storytelling and scholarship on their way to acceptance. Intersectionality seems well entrenched in women's studies and other disciplines. This is 2017. It's there. Like, I'm so sick of being like saying, you know, you are the hegemon. This ideology is the hegemon, and we're the resistance or whatever the heck. I don't have my French beret. Like, it's so, I just don't want to be told. Like,
you need
call
to
me
go
a
to
crazy dissident.
for your French.
Yeah, I do. But, I mean, does this drive you batty too? Because, like, just say you're in the minority. We're going to steamroll you. At least you're being honest. I mean, that way you can have the gallows humor, which I think this is what this podcast is.
Gallows humor.
Yeah.
So what do you think? Do you think civilization is coming to a crashing halt, or what?
I hope not, but it's.
Do you think we're at the Biden style inflection point, as he keeps
No, I think what's happening is
yammering on about?
I told you about that Twilight episode, that Zone episode that I heard where like there was a single word change. So there's one dude in like 30-minute episode. The word lunch changes to dinosaur, and so that word lunch. So they're like, let's go out and get some dinosaur, and he's like, what? And then now he quickly kind of figures out that okay, lunch is dinosaur, but then all the other words change. And then by the end, every word's changed, and he can't even talk to his wife. He can't work. He's just completely discombobulated. And we're at,
It's like what, aphasia?
Yeah, dinosaur. We're at dinosaur, and maybe 10 other words have changed. It's starting to get weird. So I hope it doesn't go there, but maybe. So I'm not freaking out, but I'm a bit concerned. But hey, I mean, again, the gallows humor. You can't let this kill you. You just have to let it. I don't know. You got to laugh. I know, and like I see Mia and Barrett are laughing in the chat too. So
oh, Mia and Barrett laugh all the time.
They do. I mean, what else can you do with this crap?
They don't do any work,
bro.
They just
really critical theories in the institution. That guy, and I guess he's some kind of superstar. I don't know. I don't get it. I don't get it. That is pure cringe. I mean, do you see it any other way? Can you stand him? Can you give the devil's advocate?
No, I can't. I can't stand him. I can't stand any professors anymore at this point. I'm I've had so many professors.
The only professor that I thought was worth it in the last bit was the guy from not Cornell. Was it? Remember the white guy in your art professor? Where was he from? Oh, Berkeley, Berkeley. Yes. The guy from Berkeley that said that the black square, the painting, the famous 1915 painting, the black square. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, black square for Black Lives Matter, and it turns out it was just a crude racist joke. I had actually learned something for
the
many hours.
Were all full of crude racist jokes.
Oh God!
Maybe I don't know.
It was just so funny, and I thought
actually,
everyone's going to get canceled.
They walked into universities with guns, and they demanded people debate them.
I know, and this guy, and the thing is, he's a crazy libertarian guy. If you pull up the article, the alligator, it shows him, and I'm like, nobody could be intimidated by this man, and he wanted to just debate me, bro, and come on. And he actually successfully sued Florida because they had put on their website that there was a racist incident, that this man came in bugging the African-American studies with a racist ideology. He sued them, and Florida took it down. So,
well, Florida's pretty based at this point.
I hope.
Going on.
I hope DeSantis gets a cleanup. I'm not blaming him. I'm just there's just. Don't let people judge people by race. That's all we want.
Yeah, well, that's what we used to have, but we're past that now. Yeah. Now we're in the glory days, the anti-racist glory days, where you are judged by your race and you better goddamn own it.
And you need to be an authentic member of your race. So if you're black, that means you need to do certain things. And if it's white, you need to feel guilty.
I mean, because then there's that whole thing that's a totally different story.
Maybe we'll cover it next week.
Okay, let's do that.
Libby, can I borrow some of your soma because I'm getting really low? And I've been watching 6 hours of critical theory a day, and it hurts.
That's your problem. I don't do that. I just watch Mia and Barrett at work all day. That's all I do.
All right, Mia and Barrett, we love you, and I'm going to hold you to the soma and. We will come back.
I never had any soma. I never had that.
Really? Well,
I don't have. Yeah, well, I don't have insurance. Where am I going to get drugs? Gotta buy them on the street.
Well, what was the other thing in Brave New World? It was soma and orgy porgy. So, do you have any orgy porgy?
Sadly, no.
Okay,
no.
So
I've got nothing.
You're screwed or not.
I have this much wine left in a jelly jar. So. Glorious times here in Brooklyn, New York, I gotta say.
Wonderful. Well, I appreciate you talking to me every week and going over the stuff, and at least if nothing else, laughing into the void because it feels better.
We're laughing into the void. Us and Kamala Harris's shoes. We're just laughing into the void. You know, her Chuck Taylors.
Oh
How
yeah,
everyone fawned over the whatever.
yeah.
I don't think it matters if she goes to the border or not. I don't think anyone.
What
I
about
think we're having more fun telling her to go than we would actually have if she actually showed up.
yeah
But anyways,
the heiress, the heiress. But thanks so much for everyone. We'll be back next week outside of a meteor hitting the planet and fill you up with